All right, so welcome back to Classically Trained. What we have today is we're going to follow up our Greek religion segment with some question and answers. Great questions, by the way. I didn't write down who asked which question. I might do that in future. Just I didn't know if you'd want your names out there. If you don't in the future, next time when I just say asking this question. If you use it, just keep my name anonymous or something like that, and we'll go from there. Um, but in any case, so great questions. Let's just start from the top again. What's the difference between Greek mythology and Greek religion? But as we said before, primarily it's the fact that it's not Greek religion is no longer actively practiced, and so we just kind of defaulted to the term mythology to make it distinct. It's not an active religion in the same way as Christianity is actively practiced, or Hinduism, or even some of the other pagan traditions, uh, primitive traditions that say Native American religion, Aboriginal religions, that kind of thing. Okay. There was a good comment about the anthropomorphism, why that's important for that the Greek synthesis. And yeah, I mean that's pretty important, and it is specific to. We'll get more into this when we get to uh, Christianity, because we'll do a segment on the synthesis between Greek intellectual traditions and Christian theology. It's specific to Christianity because, and we haven't gotten there yet, but um, for the other Abrahamic traditions like Islam and Judaism, um, God doesn't have an image; it's an imageless deity, right? And that's true to some extent for Christianity. That is, uh, God the Father doesn't have doesn't have an image associated with him necessarily. Sometimes, of course, artistically he's depicted in a certain way, but Christ had a human form, and so that's pretty particular to Christianity as a faith. Um, so there's another question. I would like to know more about how Greek religion shifted when philosophy and Plato's ideas and things like that shifted towards monotheism. Well, um, we do know that the mythological and the religious tradition started earlier. You have Hesiod and Homer writing about the stories of the gods and things like that. 18, not 18, 8, 700 BC, before Christ, BCE, same thing, before Common Era. And so that came first. The philosophical tradition really starts in the 500s with Pythagoras. We'll talk more about that later on, Plato. And so there's this gradual progression of philosophical ideas, again, towards monotheism. Um, let's see. How did regular people balance mythology with these new ideas? Well, for many, they didn't, right? That is, the Greek philosophical tradition tended to be kind of a intellectual movement. And so there was a tension between those who practiced the faith of, and you might learn this in a philosophy class, but we will probably address it a little later on in this course. But this is actually one of the things that Socrates, who was Plato's teacher, was um, executed for, was that for not practicing the traditional beliefs of Athens, right? Because he was moving towards that philosophical monotheism. And so there's a tension there between uh, those who believed in and worshipped and participated in the rituals of um, the Greek deities, and those who had started to think of them kind of as, as Plato did, as metaphors or signs that pointed to something else. Let's see. How much religious practice do we actually know versus what we've had to reconstruct? Well, as far as religious practice goes, we've had to, we've had to reconstruct basically all of it. again, if you were to ask the question, how does a Catholic, practice his religion, or how does a Hindu practice his religion, so on and so forth? Well, the best thing to do would be to, accompany them, go to a service, visit their house, things like that. Um, Outside of Time Machine, we can't do that with ancient Greek religion. Those practices essentially died off, or again, were assimilated into Christianity. So all we have left of them, and there's no continuing. There were priests and priestesses of Greek deities, but there's no line of tradition that connects those priests to to anything that we have now. That is, we don't have any priests and priestesses of Athena, for example, or Zeus. So again, a lot of it has to be pieced together from what was written down, and sometimes, that's not a lot. Let's see. How long did it take for Christianity to stick to people? And again, these are questions we'll come back around to when we do study Christianity. But again, started in the Jewish community, but in a region that was ruled by Rome, but was also part of the Greek cultural um, life, right? And so this is one of the reasons with Christian scripture, you have it moving from Hebrew for the Old Testament to Greek for the New Testament to Latin for when they put the biblical canon together. Anyway, essentially, and how long does it take? Well, it takes several hundred years, which sounds like a long time. Um, Historically, it was actually pretty rapid. Okay. How normal peoples, not specifically priests, practice, say, Greek religious tradition. Again, that's mostly guesswork. I'll look more into that and see what kind of details we can fill in there, but we just don't have a whole lot. Um, all right, Pygmalion, and Pandora. Would like to know more about that. I'm going to look for some links to these stories rather than trying to recount all of those here. Let's see. So I'll get you some links for that. Here we have one of these. Uh, Somebody brings up the question in relation to Pandora, um, the question of why there's evil in the world. And again, how do you answer that question is one of the central issues of religious faith. Um, all right. And we'll talk. The technical term is theodicy. It's a question of the question of God's justice in the universe, and yet we'll explore that, in an ongoing way. Um, okay, let's see. Again, how was it practiced? Myths and religions. How have they transcended the ages? And where is it practiced in contemporary times? Well, again, explicitly it's not, but there are things like, say, Saturnalia, right? That was a Roman festival, around the time that now we now celebrate Christmas. And so, as far as festivals are concerned, generally the outline of a festival tends to be fairly similar across most religions. It's a time where you don't work. It's usually centered on feasting of some kind, celebrations, things like that. So a lot of those things were kind of sublimated into uh, current practices. And we'll talk more. The next part of this talk will be about Norse religion, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But the names of most of our weeks, the names of the days of most of the week are Norse. Um, so there are certain ways that these things have trickled down. Let's see. Okay. Anthrop- Anthropomorphism again, and yes, that is pretty important. Like, why were the uh, why were the Greek gods anthropomorphic? Like, why did the Greeks envision gods in such a way? Like, do we know? And it's like, well, that's a very good question, and exactly why that is, we don't know. What we do know is that it's, distinct. Again, the Norse are the same, but it is fairly distinct in that region to do that, and why they did that. That is a interesting question to explore. We do know that the Greeks thought of the human form as very beautiful, so they were kind of already culturally human centered. In a way that perhaps other cultures were less so. That is, they thought humans were, you know, the human form was beautiful, for example. Um, okay. Okay, and we had one. There's something that I should correct here. If I didn't speak clearly on this, Poseidon's the god of the sea for the Greeks, not the god of the underworld. That's Hades. So just to clarify that. Okay. Do most people now, Christianity is actually the most widely practiced religion currently in the world, but um, I wouldn't say most people are Christians at this point. Let's see. Uh, okay, again, how long does it take for the populations to go from polytheism to monotheism? Historically, it's pretty rapid, but this is a process that takes several hundred years, and it depends on the region, obviously, right? That is, Christianity starts um, in that area of the Eastern Mediterranean, right? And so, as it spreads, that idea of monotheism spreads first to kind of the southern parts of Europe and North Africa, right? And then later on, to the upper parts of Europe, uh, like Germany, Scandinavia, things like that. Mm, all right. So that's it. As far as again, great questions. If there's a pressing question I did not get to and really like to know more about, let me know. Just shoot me an email. Okay, just to move to very briefly, we'll just do a little, just hit some very big points on Norse religion. Um, this is the world Yggdrasil. Um, the world tree. That's part. It's pretty central to the Norse conception of the world. Um, what to talk? Well, okay. As I mentioned before, if you look at the names of our weekdays, we have Sunday, which is named after the sun. There's Monday, which is named after the moon. The most of the others, with the exception of Saturday, that's named after Saturn, actually. Those are all Norse. That is, Tuesday is named after Tyr, who's the god of war in Norse mythology. Wednesday is Woden or Odin's day. Thursday is Thor's day, day of Thor, and Friday is Freya or Freyja's day. Depends on which version of the story. And so most of our days are actually still recognized are named after Norse deities. And when I say Norse, I mean uh, that Scandinavian part, which is not just Northern Europe, but kind of pretty far to the north. Like, um, and we have those. We probably have less records of fewer records of European paganism, especially in the North, than we do of Greek uh, paganism. Um, we guess, and again, we still have some fragments from Germanic tales and things like that. And the idea is they're pretty similar, but we talk more about Norse mythology than say German mythology, uh, simply because we have better records of it, and that's primarily because we have some surviving documents, the Eddas, the Elder Edda and the Younger Edda, and that's where some of some of those ideas, some of those concepts were preserved. If you've those of you who are fans of Lord of the Rings, right? Tolkien himself was a philologist, which means he was a linguist, and essentially the way he tells the story is that he wanted to reconstruct what were the languages of Northern Europe, right? And by reconstructing their language, what would their stories have looked like? And Lord of the Rings was, kind of his attempt to recreate some of the mythology of Northern Europe. Tolkien himself was a Catholic, and so it's highly Christianized. But that was that's the whole idea of trying to work in dragons and elves and fairies and you know dwarves and things like that. Those are all you know those are all um, taken from the mythology of Northern Europe. Okay, let's see. What do we want to say about this? Again, not to get too weighted down with that. Part of the Eddas that we have is what we would call the cosmology, which is where does the cosmos come from? It's actually called the Song of Ice and Fire. If that sounds familiar to you, Game of Thrones fans, that's not an accident. Um, and if you look at some of the I think I gave you guys a link to some of the introduction to the Elder Edda. And Tolkien actually borrowed a lot of names straight from it, like Gandalf and Thorin and things like that. We probably don't need to get into the cosmogony, again, the birth of the cosmos. If you want to know more about it, go ahead and read that section. Um, let's see. One of the things, what I do want you to get to, um, again, to hit some of the highlights here. Um, this is Odin, Woden, two different names, right? I mean, for the same guy. Um, Odin hanging from the tree. Now he suffers on this, and if that seems symbolically interesting, yeah, it, it is. I think the most important things to realize about Norse mythology and why it's interesting is that its concept of deities, gods, was like the Greeks anthropomorphic. That is, they envisioned the gods to look like human beings. But unlike the Greeks thought of the gods as looking like human beings, but different from human beings in that they were immortal, right? Human beings were mortal, gods were immortal. Very interestingly, with the Norse conception, their gods are mortal. They can die. Odin actually doesn't die here; he suffers. But there are stories of the Norse gods meeting death, right? And also they have this idea, also very interesting. They had this concept of an end of the world. We call that eschatology, or that's a we'll get more into that later. But that's about an envisioning how things end. That's and it's very prominent in the Norse worldview. They call it Ragnarok uh, in the Germanic. It's Gotterdammerung. But anyway, it's Twilight of the Gods. It's when and they envision the gods actually losing to the giants, the forces of chaos. Anyway, so that's very interesting. So the Norse gods are actually mortal. Why does Odin hang on this tree? He's trying to gain knowledge of runes, and when he does, he shares that with humans. So that's another very interesting thing about Norse mythology, the Norse gods, is that unlike the Greek gods, who occasionally liked human beings individually, like in Athena kind of likes Odysseus and things like that. In general, the Greek attitude towards humans is pretty indifferent. They're kind of playthings, chess pieces, just to be used. They didn't hold them in terribly high regard. For the Norse, the gods have this kind of friendly relationship with humans, want to help humans out, also expect humans to help them out. And so when Odin gains the knowledge of the runes here, he shares them with the humans. And there is this idea that humans and gods will fight together against the giants later on. Um, so that's pretty interesting as well. Um, to dive in a little bit to, again, this isn't the Norse, but you may have heard this on, again, these mythologies are probably pretty similar. Oh, well, anyway, I shouldn't say it's not Norse. These are kind of linked, right? You might have heard of Valkyries and Valhalla and things like that. So these are similar concepts across the Norse and the Germanic pagan tradition. But anyway, the Valkyries are these shield maidens who take the honored dead to Valhalla. So Valhalla, and you can get a sense of what the Nordic, Northern German um, culture was like in that their vision of heaven, Valhalla, is where you get to um, essentially you're taken there if you die in glorious battle, and basically you get to practice fighting. The warriors of Valhalla fight each other, kill each other, and then at the end of the day are resurrected to fight again, and therefore sharpen their skills. So it as a worldview, it's very some have described it as centered on heroism. That is, there is the sense of impending doom, but there's also the sense of being brave in the face of that impending doom. So, anyway, if you want to know a little bit more about Norse mythology, do a little bit of the reading and come up with some questions if you'd like. But again, just some big points there that I want you to realize about the Norse conception of deities, of gods, is that in many ways it's similar to the Greek in that they both have this idea of that the gods look like human beings. The Norse gods are a little more friendly to humans than the Greek gods, and the Norse gods are actually mortal. Their Norse gods can die. Okay, so until next time, that will do it. Let me know if you have any questions. And next up, we'll probably do a little lecture on karma as a concept because we're shifting gears towards the east to take a look at that. And karma is a concept that's important to Hinduism, Buddhism, um, Eastern traditions in general. Put a pretty high degree of importance on this idea of karma, the karmic principle. All right. See you next time.